Up next, I'm actually going to be bringing a C-suite perspective to join me on the stage. And this distinguished panel of executives is going to engage with me in a bit of a candid dialogue on how leadership shapes a stronger, more secure future for global payments. I'm excited for them to share with you how their organizations are operationalizing trust, exchanging intelligence, navigating change, and demonstrating that what it takes to drive meaningful, lasting impact on payment security at the highest levels of leadership. And so I'm going to welcome my guests. My guests are Barry Levett, founder and CEO of Mypinpad. Barry is a fintech entrepreneur with over 25 years of experience in technology, capital markets, and global industry, including very senior roles at Merrill Lynch, Shell, and BHP Billiton, in both the UK and in Singapore. We are super excited to have Barry join us. We were fortunate enough to also have him included in some of our panels in North America. Then we have Nicholas Lim, the CTO of SoftSpace. Nick has an impressive track record in the dynamic landscape of the financial industry. Nick's commitment encompasses dedication to information security and an unparalleled user experience that has disrupted conventional financial services. And finally, we have Ben Ellis, the Chief Information Security Officer at Worldline. Ben has 2 decades of risk and security expertise across the Asia-Pacific region and is bringing a unique combination of deep technical knowledge and executive communication skills to complex compliance challenges. Please join me in helping to welcome these executive leaders to the stage. Nick, thank you. Ben, thank you. Barry, thank you. Fantastic. Okay, let's get us started. Make sure I have all of my tools working. Not yet. All right. I'll have maybe the magic behind the screen can help me advance the slide a bit. Okay, nope. Well, I guess to set the stage, what we'll do is go ahead and get started. So I think we all talk about security being a shared responsibility. And that is sometimes a difficult challenge for an executive who also is working for potentially an organization that has goals of growth and speed and being first to market. How do we balance a culture? How do we create a culture? How do we balance the need to meet the business goals, but also balance security or payment risk management principles? Barry, do you mind if I start with you?
Yeah, I think the only way to really get it to work is to build it in from the ground up. I'm really thinking internally. If security is designed into the products and into the processes, then and not an afterthought, then you don't really have that kind of conflict, because you're building it in the beginning. It's designed, it's built, it's rolled out, and it's checked, right? That's the one side is instilling that processes and the controls internally. I think for us now, a lot of the risk is actually externally. Mm-hmm. Particularly as SoftPOS grows in popularity, its risk increases. But you also have the risk of new entrants into the industry. Mm-hmm. You can quite easily spoil the industry with insecure software who don't play by the rules, that don't go and get lab tested, who don't take security seriously. So, the balancing act for us as leaders in the organization within the industry is to police our own team, mm-hmm. and build things correctly, but also try to help to look at the industry and make sure that the quality is in the industry.
Thank you for that. Barry, as the CISO, how are you working with some of your internal business partners where your focus or your accountability is to secure your organization, how do you best support and collaborate internally where you may have business goals of growth and speed?
Yeah, it's an interesting question at the moment. I think we are becoming more reliant on trusted partners, suppliers, customers to join us in this effort. It's no longer a siloed entity that's trying to be secure. You do need to organize security across multiple organizations, which is not always easy. I think one of the best things we can do is we are all in the same industry. There's a saying that a rising tide lifts all ships. I think in the payment industry particularly, it is very focused on trust and assurance. So not only do we have to make sure that our environments are secure, but we need to support and guide other organizations as well to lift all those ships.
That's great. Nick, what are your thoughts? Beyond technical controls, how do you establish that type of shared responsibility across the organization?
Yeah, I think I really like the ideas of what Barry mentions about, security is by design and it shouldn't be an afterthought. So in a way, what we really do is to make it visible, and it has to be from the executive levels. Because when you make it, frequent enough to say that, security is the foundations, it is not something like a product features that you can roll out and change later on. So once you do that frequent enough, the awareness will build up, whether it is from the business, from the sales, or from the technicals and engineering teams, and even to the support teams. So in that way, there will be a lot of what I would like to call autonomous conversations inserted in many of the discussions. So when you talk about how do we design a certain things, how do we cost it in from a commercial point of view, do we need this, do we need that to make sure that it is secure, or even a engineering retros sessions, a review sessions. So all this will be a conversation points that we will talk about when it comes to security. So that is the way that how we really work with each other to balance off.
So it doesn't sound like it's just a group's role. It's more part of your culture and a shared goal or shared responsibility in what you're bringing to market or how you represent your organization as a whole. That's fantastic. Have you found maybe experiences where, because of those shared goals, that you've been more successful in meeting business goals? How about you? Can I start with you?
Yeah, so I think security is sometimes seen as a department that says no. I don't think that's fitting with modern organizations anymore. We have to be an enabler, we have to be supporting the business. So to do that, we don't just understand the technical controls that we have, but we have to understand business objectives, what we're trying to achieve. We work with the businesses to set risk appetites, risk tolerance. You have to understand the environment to have a business, and to have a business, you have to understand security as well.
That reminds me of some of the conversations that we've had in some of the previous community meeting sessions about truly understanding what your business goals are, but also your part of that process. And establishing credibility, you can't always be the office of no. You have to be more of a partner where you can speak intelligently about what those business goals are and translate the potential risk to your business leaders to be able to make decisions or create mitigation strategies. Yeah. Nick, what are your thoughts on, are you seeing that because you are able at the executive levels create that common foundation for security as well as meeting a market demand, that you've been able to successfully create that culture where you're seeing those results maybe faster than the resistance internally?
Yeah, definitely. But I would just like to share a little bit more on a, elevated levels. So I have to bring some context back to Southeast Asia. I'm sure everyone on the stage, on the audience would be able to resonance with that. So we talk about Southeast Asia's QR, right? So QR payment is one of the fastest growing payment methods in this part of the world. And basically, we don't start with everything's in place. So QR started with just a piece of paper, a standee, what we call static QR. And it deployed very quickly like a virus, everybody get it. But I think back then we underestimate the points that it is easily tampered. So it does happen, and in this part of the world as well. So I think during that time, it is really a thought of whether are we abandon QR or do we do something about it, right? We can always go back to the card rail. And I guess one of the key things is that we didn't really abandon the QR, but instead we refer to global standard like your EMV codes, QR standards, or we move everything back to dynamics. So that way give us a little bit of a better situation, anti-spoofing and stuff like that can happen. And why I bring this up, it is because of the early acknowledge of security concerns in the implementation of QR. So look at us today, in this region, we are talking about service provider specific QR aggregated into a national QR by the government-led initiative. And we are also talking about cross-border QR, like a certain country within this region has been able to pay using their local QR apps, but in a different countries. So none of this would have been possible if we do not put security first when we see that particular issue is happening.
That's right. Almost helps you run faster.
Yeah.
That's right. That's fantastic. And Barry, what are your thoughts? As being the founder and CEO, you're balancing being in market, but it's your brand. Have you seen that you've been able to successfully generate the culture that has allowed you to meet your business goals, but also have security remain a priority?
Yeah, I mean, the security one is an interesting part because it creates friction. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, every payment business, doesn't matter what you do, but every payment business is really an operations business, right? Can you get a transaction securely from A to B at very low cost but high security, right? So it's a really operations sort of business.
That's right.
And the effect of creating some friction, like the security and compliance friction, is it forces you to be much more efficient in your designing your operations. And you know, there's an analogy maybe from other industries, which is on the construction industry. You know, construction industry historically was plagued with, accidents. You know, very few places were accident-free on anything like a good basis. And they reformed themselves. They said, no, okay, we're going to build safety into what they do. And as a result, they didn't just get much better safety records. They ended up with much better of operations end to end. They build buildings faster, safer, better with fewer errors, right? So that it scales. So if you can in some ways take that friction as a benefit and say, okay, I'm going to make that friction as easy to manage as possible, you also solve the rest of the operational issues. So that's a little bit the approach that we're trying to take. I think the first part or the first hurdle is, passing the requirement set. But your next hurdle after that is really embedding it from an operational perspective.
Thank you. It's great perspectives. I appreciate that. So what's next? There's certainly no shortage of opportunity and innovation happening in our payments industry, but there's also no shortage of potential bad actors looking at exploiting our payments industry. As you look forward, what's next on the security frontier? Are there technologies that you're excited about or concerned about, or risk management principles or frameworks that are on your mind that you'd like to share with our group today? I'll start with you, Barry, if you don't mind.
Well, everybody's talking about AI, so that's the one risk set, and I kind of get goosebumps every time I talk about AI because I really do distinguish between LLMs and machine learning. I think machine learning does a huge amount to reduce risk. But the misuse of LLMs, ChatGPT type models, and unless the industry understands the difference in the uses, etc., it's more likely to end up being somebody who doesn't know how to use a hammer is more likely to hit their thumb than the nail. So there's some concern around that. I think there's a passive concern I mentioned earlier about new entrances into particularly the soft POS or the mobile side.
Okay.
As that market grows and it creates quite penetration, it attracts new entrants, but also attracts, somebody that can. It also attracts the risks, the risk set against it. So in terms of the mitigations, a lot of it is looking towards the technologies within our industry, particularly around tokenization, is quite great. But also on the mobile side, and the manufacturers are doing great jobs across the board there.
Before I move to the next panelist, I'm interested in your thoughts on, is there advice for the council? Is there work that the council might best help support some of those concerns that you've outlined? It's the whole industry. So it's the council. I mean, I would take my hat off to the council, particularly in the last 18 months, and around the MPOC. Thank you.
And particularly around the MPOC standards, because have been very responsive in terms of feedbacks and trying to correct it and make it a standard that works for everybody. So I think continue doing that, continue with the FAQs and the progression. I think that's the one element. And a lot of the rest of the action is across all the providers, and particularly the schemes, building out these technologies, working together, building out some of these new technologies.
Well, that's wonderful to keep in mind. Thank you for that. More to come. You hear that, Andrew? Great job. Great job, Andrew. All right, I'll move on to Ben. What's on your mind of the future? What's on the frontier of security and your role? What do you think about?
Yeah, we're also definitely thinking about AI. I think it's a fantastic weapon as a defensive mechanism as well, but it's also its own weapon in its own outright. So it's one to be careful of. We work in 8 APAC nations. We have around 100 banks, and we're starting to see some biometric bypasses occurring with AI technology, which is kind of scary. We've always thought our face was our face. No one else can take this from me.
That's right.
But these days there are some interesting developments in that area, which is eye-opening.
That's right.
On the flip side, I think there is a lot more that AI can do to enable banking in underdeveloped markets. I think using AI to help with selecting customers, selecting credit limits, selecting ways that customers can use that will enable more customers to have a card, perhaps the first for many customers, especially if I look at regional areas here in Thailand as well. There's fraud detection that we're doing some work with at the moment as well to enable our customers to just take some simple steps to protect their customer base as well. So AI is definitely big. The other big one that we are looking into quite deeply is quantum cryptography. So we do have a cryptography team based in Netherlands at the moment, and we're looking at what it means if quantum cryptography becomes a tool that can be used by certain individuals or entities around the world. So this is an interesting area. I think we've always been told it's coming, it's going to be here next year. But if you look at recent developments, it's no longer theoretical. There are hardware-based quantum computers out there working in a small amount, but it is starting to come up quicker. So we are developing PQC cryptographic standards, outlining which ones should be used in our organizations. We communicate this with customers. We want as many people as possible to start thinking about PQC as well.
Thank you for that. From an AI perspective, when I first joined the council, I think that was certainly a topic on everyone's mind, but it didn't feel quite as imminent.
Correct.
In a very short period of time, certainly we've seen how it's on everyone's mind, but it's also at everyone's fingertips. And so the council, I think, certainly has tried to be more visible in providing guidance, but certainly we have work to do there. And I think as we're learning from if we're engaging with our stakeholders, we'll learn a lot from what you're seeing, where there's opportunity, but also where there might be opportunity for the council to best support the security of that from a payments perspective. Any other advice for the council that you might have on either AI or what you're thinking from a quantum computing risk perspective?
So I quite like the way that the council approaches it from a PAN-based. Everything is about protecting the PAN. There are many threats against PAN out there. There are many threats against PAN out there. AI is one. It is emerging quite quickly as well. But the way the council has structured the standards, I think, is quite good because it's all about the PAN and the way it can protect it from any of these emerging technologies as well.
Wonderful. Thank you for that feedback. And Nick, what's on your mind? What's next on the frontier from a security perspective that perhaps you're excited about, maybe a little cautiously concerned about?
Yeah, my mind is talking about AI.
Okay.
But I can't talk about AI, otherwise it sounds like a broken record. But really, I do recognize AIs and even some quantums as one of the threats looming around, and it's quite real, and every day is changing. I would just like to bring about another concept where we talk about, I talk about this in the Europe community meetings on QR, and when we look at how QR works today, even in Southeast Asia, we are no longer protecting the PANs and a bunch of numbers, right? So we are protecting a context. And within this context, one of the more important things that we talk about is really identity. So identity, it could be your face, it could be, it's just who you are, right? So when we talk about context, basically what we are talking about to understand how a particular person is paying, why is he or she is paying, or even who is he or she. So that is something that we're protecting because if it is being used, somehow it get access to your payment instruments, it get access to an actual money movement. So that would be some things that I would really think is going to be challenging, and is the next things that are going to happen, right? And AI definitely is a field to that.
I mean, I completely agree with my colleagues. If we change the question slightly about, rather than the technologies, it's really about how the market's moved, is one thing is the rapid acceptance of mobile device as a substitute for proving an identity. Because we have banking apps and it's wider than payments, but we have a lot of these things which are anchored to a device, which is then anchored to a biometric, a fingerprint or something.
Yes.
But in many households, the whole household's got access to that device. They've all got their registration. So you're no longer actually tying a payment to an individual. And from a risk perspective, it sort of just happened, but it's almost not being considered the rules haven't really taken that into account.
Right. That's a lot. How do you see enabling, I guess, maybe customers or your partners to be able to address that shift?
Well, as far as I can see, it means we need an extra thing beyond the biometrics in that circumstance, which may be 2 levels of biometrics if we're going to use that. But I think it just needs to be, when we're designing these systems, to actually know whether you've authenticated a device or an individual.
Yes.
And they're not the same thing, right? But they're processing as if the device is the individual, which was fine historically, but it's not true anymore.
Yes.
The way people are using this. And you're getting this concentration of the same, particularly biometric, which you can't change, is used to unlock so many different things at the same time.
That's right.
And you kind of, one of the questions is, do you still carry a wallet? And my answer is yes. I love technology, but putting everything on that one device scares me too much, right? I'll use it as a primary, but that is, everything is a problem. So from a risk perspective, and I think it's wider than security, I think it's the whole payment industry of saying that is the token for everything. It's like having a super key.
That's right.
It's problematic.
That is concerning. Absolutely.
And also to add on to that, to Barry's points, I think what the council is doing today is going to be very helpful because at the foundations we have a very strong cards, pen, and pins kind of protections standards. And within Southeast Asia especially, we are talking about, it's not that we don't have a standard, but it's quite diverse in a way. So different countries would have different views on how we're going to protect the mobile banking apps, how we're going to protect the QR payments and stuff like that. So it will be very, very helpful if the councils will be able to then step in with the knowledge of many years back for the pans and pins to then harmonize these standards. So it is through this kind of collaborations that we will be able to see how we're going to drive from a security point of view, where every device or even every individual's authorizations, there is a rationale behind how we're going to authenticate them, how do we going to allow them to use a certain instrument versus the other one. So I think that kind of collaboration would need to take place in a sense.
Thank you for that insight. That's great. Okay, I'm going to actually advance this a little forward and talk about some of you potentially in this room want to give the opportunity for us to have the time with these executive leaders and share their perspectives on what advice they might have for emerging security professionals. What advice would you have for some of those that may actually help us address some of the future threats and technologies that we've talked about here? Any thoughts on what you would want to know if you were here as a more junior security professional? How about, Ben, if I start with you?
Can do. As a security professional, it kind of will feel like at times you've got a lot of weight on your shoulder. You're having to look after legal contracts, financial agreements. You're having to get into the technology and understand what that's like as well. If there are any junior techs in here, the biggest advice I can give is just to go out and collaborate. It could be formal like this. You can come to conferences, you can attend workshops. This is fantastic. But just having a group of similar people that is outside of your organization that you can have, I want to say open, but confidential discussions with each other. Ask each other, have you solved this problem before? Ask each other, what technology are you using for this? Just having that ability to communicate with someone else in a similar position, but not within your organization, it's very beneficial. So please get out there, please talk to other security professionals, please meet, drink, be merry, whatever you need to do to start that conversation. It's well worth it, and you'll build lifelong friends. This industry, especially as a security professional, you'll see people move around, but everyone sort of stays in the same area. So make those friends. It will pay off for you.
Having a trusted network, absolutely. Right. Nick, some advice for our community members here?
Yeah, I think it's aligned with what Ben has mentioned, is really to broaden your view. Understand that there's a lot on your plate, but I think one of the key things that really needs to happen as security professionals is to understand how business works. Right? It's not to say that you need to know how to drive business to close sales, but to understand how a particular business works, what the end user is expecting. So that would help for you to craft out your securities framework and try to make it invisible, but not compromising. So that would be one way that it will be a trend that a lot of security professionals would need to equip with this kind of skill set moving forwards, because the demand will just keep on going. And one of the places to really start off is to join the PO of PCI. So we have a lot of insights to share, and I'm glad that I did that a few years back, and really it broadened my horizon to understand, there are certain things that has been done, like what Ben has mentioned, which maybe in our country we haven't thought about that. And that helped us a lot in implementing how a countermeasure is supposed to be working. I don't need to go on silos and start all over again.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, that's great feedback. Thank you. Again, a bit more of that collaboration and networking opportunity for sure.
Yeah.
That's great. And Barry, advice for our members here today?
Probably two things. The first one is, maybe as a mantra, don't confuse compliance and security. They're not the same thing.
That's
And it's very easy to be in compliance and have something that's not secure. It sounds anathema, but understand that people who wrote the rules or the compliance sets are human, and they could have made mistakes, and technology moves. Security is a different thing. You know, security is the primary. That's what the focus is, and if you do it really well, you'll be in compliance. So that's the first part. The second part is try to spend a lot of time with operations and product, but particularly operations, because where I see there's conflicts between these groups is when they're doing security design in a silo. And quite often, if you design it slightly differently, it's just as secure, but it fits the operations. And just don't create a culture of conflict. Just spend time with the operations products team, become an ally, and everybody's life will be a lot easier.
That's great insight as well. Understanding different perspectives of even within your same organization certainly helps you become better at your role. That's great. And you've all hit a little bit on collaboration as part of that, and also networking. So I think perhaps it's a great way for us to also encourage that same kind of activity here while we're together, either in our networking sessions, in between breaks. But I agree, I think over the course of my career, I've had wonderful opportunity to meet so many talented security professionals at the PCI community meetings. And like you said, have had lifelong relationships with all of them. And whether or not they're still within the payment space or have moved on, some of those connections have become friendships that will span our lives. So great insights, and thank you. So what I'd like to do is thank this panel for sharing their time with us and their insights with all of us. What came clearly through today is that securing the future of payments isn't just a compliance exercise, right? It is about not just controls and technologies, but it's also about leadership and having leaders that are looking for creating collaboration internally, creating security by design, and shared goals amongst the teams that helps set the tone for accountability, but also helps balance security and growth and innovation desires. But I also am taking away that you've invested in your people and in the networks that you've created, and that has made a tremendous difference. And as advice to this group, please continue to take that outside of this room and expand your network, invest in those network and the discussions around security and what you're seeing in the payment space. So we'll continue to carry forward these conversations throughout our sessions as well as our time together this week. Please help me thank these wonderful panelists for their perspectives and their time for us today.